Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages. Hey, I'd like to welcome everybody back to Mysterious Goings On for the first episode of Season 8. Can you believe it? Now, we haven't done 8 years, but we're now starting our 8th season. It took me a few years to figure out that, maybe a whole year did not have to be a season. But at any rate, we've been doing this show since 2016, and I couldn't think of anybody better to come back and talk to us to kick off Season 8 than Scottish crime writer Douglas Skelton. We're going to get to that interview in just a moment. Thanks again for being a supporter of Mysterious Goings On. I look forward to having another great season with you here on the show.
Hi, this is Bunyet Ngene, author of The Bodies That Move, and you're listening to Mysterious Goings On.
It just seems like it was yesterday when we first met Douglas Skelton. He is admittedly a favorite guest here of mine. He's somebody I love his work, his take on crime in crime fiction. I enjoy speaking with him, and I'm really lucky, and I think you are too, to welcome him back to Mysterious Goings On. Let me tell you a little bit about him. First thing I'm going to say, though, is if you haven't heard the first episode with Douglas Skelton, please go to mgopod.com and check it out. It's right around April of 2020 is the date on the mgopod.com. You can find it. It's called A Conversation with Scottish Thriller author Douglas Skelton, and it's a good one. We have a really good conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think you will too. So you haven't heard that, we'll wait. We'll stop what we're doing. We'll wait for you patiently. Let us know when you come back, and then we'll talk today. It's all good. If you don't know, or you need a little refresher, Skelton was born in Glasgow. He's been a bank clerk, tax officer, taxi driver for 2 days, wine waiter for 2 hours, journalist and investigator. He has written several true crime and Scottish criminal history books, but now concentrates on fiction. His novels Open Wounds and Thunder Bay were long listed for the McIlvanney Prize. He's investigated real-life crime for Glasgow solicitors and was involved in a long-running campaign to right the famous Ice Cream Wars miscarriage of justice. And by the way, that's if you're not familiar with the Glasgow Ice Cream Wars, that's not a joke. That's something you really should look up. And maybe we'll ask Douglas about it as we welcome him back to Mysterious Goings On.
How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I've got to say, I want to get the accolades out of the way real quick, but I have to tell you, I reviewed Thunder Bay, the first Rebecca Connolly book, and this is part of it. And I said it's a cracking good thriller taking place before an atmospheric Scottish setting that's almost as much a character as our questing heroine, Rebecca Connolly. This book doesn't take the easy route of cozy mystery cutouts. Instead, it realistically examines the psychological and emotional hole blown through the survivors of the murdered. As dark as the story can be in places, it still solves the mystery entertainingly. I said this before, I'll say it again. He's a new master of the genre, and I'm wild with anticipation for the second book in the series, The Blood Is Still. Are you still there, or have you checked out?
No, I'm still here. I was just thinking, do you know, that was exactly what I was thinking when I was writing the book.
Was it really?
No, thank you very much for the kind words.
So tell us a little bit, if you would, what's been going on since we last spoke? Obviously, after Thunder Bay, tremendous success. You introduced your new character, Rebecca Connolly. You've moved on, and as I said, you've got The Blood Is Still, and what's been going on with you?
Yeah, well, the Blood Is Still obviously came out here in the UK first, and came out in the USA. I think it was it January, February of this year. I have a third Rebecca Connolly book coming out here in the UK in August. No news yet as to whether it's going to hit the US stands. And I'm currently writing the fourth one.
Wow.
In between, what have I done? I've written an historical thriller on spec. I don't know whether that will ever see the light of day, but it's written anyway, and it's with my agent. I've moved house. I did live in the wilds of rural Ayrshire, which is in the southwest of Scotland. I've now moved back closer to Glasgow just to get back into civilization. And that's about it, really. Just something called lockdown and COVID hit. I don't know if anybody's heard of this, but it did seem to hit quite a few of us. It was terrible. It really was terrible.
Well, and I think that kind of leads me to my next question, though. And I think it's really the question that's burning a hole into all of your fans, especially people who are fans of your Instagram account. How are Tom and Mickey?
Tom and Mickey are fine. While you were doing your introduction, all I could hear was Tom in the cat box. And I thought, I wonder if that's getting picked up. Now, I don't know whether that was a comment on your introduction or my book. So I think we'll leave it at that. Mickey is just back in. I took him out for a walk ahead of time, so he should settle down. But no doubt he will be heard from at some point during the conversation, because he does make a point of that.
That sounds grand to me. That sounds good. And how are they enjoying the move? Is it been okay for them? I mean, you used to. I know you take them, as you say, on walks. You take them. You used to. You took them both on walks. Do you still take Tom with you, or can you not do that now that you're in a more suburban or urban setting?
Yeah, no, I don't do it here. It wasn't that I took Tom on walks before. It was that Tom came on walks. Tom is a cat. You don't take cats anywhere. They will come or they don't. It's up to them. He used to follow along on the walks when I lived in the rural area, but I wouldn't do it here. They've settled in perfectly well. There are walks that I can take Mickey. There's a place nearby that's just for quick walks. That I can put him in the car 5-10 minutes away. I've got country parks nearby, which he loves. You've probably seen some of the photographs on Instagram and Twitter, Alex. But yeah, they've settled in fine. They're good. They're good company.
Speaking of your social media, and again, there'll be links in the show notes, folks. And if you're on Instagram, it's a real treat to look at a lot of Douglas's work, because you're actually a fine photographer, and I know you actually do you sell some of that work? I know you copyright a lot of it. You do sell that work, and
the copyright is the software. is put on there by the software that I use, and I can't figure out how to take it off. Yeah. So, yes, I do sell them. There's the Pick Fair. I think it's pickfair.com, actually. I have a storefront there, and I've got some of the shots up there. I really need to pay some attention to that and get some more up.
Not only do you often do these incredible vistas, and of course you do happen to live in a gorgeous place that's full of those, but you also, I know, done some work kind of using a program, like you say, the program to kind of alter the reality of the photo a little bit, and there's just some really magnificent stuff you do there. It's a nice thing. I don't see that a lot. I'm an amateur photographer myself, but I don't see a lot of writers who actually move that kind of ball forward, so to speak. They do the writing and the photography, so it's a real treat. So I recommend everybody check the show notes link there, and you'll find his Insta. You should follow him. It's fun, and you can of course see Tom and Mickey. Yes. So this moving of houses, though, I'm curious, and again, we talked so much last time. We kind of covered a lot of your history, and I, as much as you and I both want to re-go over that ground, I'll just leave that to the listeners to go check out, and make sure that they can hear about your work, where you investigated, you worked with crime, the crime beat, and you worked with solicitors, and it was on all those things, but. Now I think it's just more of a focus today of just talking about the writing life, and you've, as I said in the introduction, have moved on from your nonfiction crime stuff, and we kind of covered that, as I said last time, and you're focusing more on these works. I guess I'm a little surprised to hear there's a fourth Rebecca book coming, to be honest. I thought it was maybe just going to be a trilogy or so, but you didn't tell me that. I just thought it was going to be, but I think, as you said last time, hey, as long as they're selling, I keep writing.
Yeah. That's right. And hey, who knows? Maybe it'll never come out. who can tell? Maybe I'll never finish it. Yeah, that'll be for 2022. I am contracted to do it, so it'll be for 2022. But I understand what you're saying, and I do have a kind of short attention span with what I write myself, because the first series that I wrote was only 4 books long. The next one was only 2. The one after that struggled to be 1. And now we're into Rebecca, and I'm hip deep in the 4th one. So who knows, what can as I say, it depends. If they stop selling, then obviously I move on. But because of the way that I think, that's why I did the historical thriller. I wanted to do something else in between Rebecca 3 and Rebecca 4. And I'd been thinking about this. Actually, for years, I'd been thinking about this storyline that I wanted to do. And I made the mistake one day of telling my friend, Denzel Myrick, who's a best-selling author. And I told him what it was. And he said, "Oh, you have to write that. You have to write that." And we share an agent. And he told her, the cheeky monkey, and she showed an interest in it as well. So I thought, well, I better write this thing. So I sat down one day and I thought, I'd actually told Joe, my agent, that it'll take me a while to write because of the research. And she translated that to about 2 years. And I was actually thinking in terms of months rather than years. But one day I sat down and I thought, well, I'm going to do this. And I think I wrote and did some of the research, what research I hadn't already done, in about 3.5 months. And produced a workable draft in that time. So I'm actually quite proud of it. As I say, who knows? Might never see the light of day.
So she's actively shopping it. Your agent is shopping it around the publishers.
She's got it. She has it just now. She's not started shopping it. I think she will be, hopefully soon. If you happen to be listening, Joe, fingers crossed. So that should be happening imminently, hopefully.
Do you mind just telling me what period of history or the setting or anything about it, just in general? I know you probably want to keep it under wraps until it's being actively shopped, but I was just curious.
Yeah, I can tell you it's set in the year 1715, and the action moves from London to Edinburgh to the Central Highlands.
Okay, well, that's the reason I ask is because in The Blood is Still, we have a little bit of a historical tie-in here. I was just wondering, is there any connection between that book and The Blood is Still and the action going on there?
No, there's not. But that was the conversation that we were having, because Denzel had read the opening to The Blood is Still. No, not The Blood is Still, sorry. He'd read the opening to the 3rd book, which is coming out in August here in the UK, which is called A Rattle of Bones. And what he said, "Oh, you should write an historical book." And I said, "It's funny you should say that, Denzel. I've had this in mind for a while." So it's more the 3rd one that it came out of. But no, it's a completely different period of time. It's the Jacobite rebellion in The Blood is Still that the action refers to. This is actually earlier than that. So it's 1715. The Jacobite rebellion was 1745, 1746. But in 1715, there was also another one, but not with Bonnie Prince Charlie.
Ah, okay.
I hope you followed that, because that sounded very convoluted to me.
Who are you talking to, Douglas? I mean, have you heard half of my questions? I mean, good Lord, you could boil a cup of tea waiting for me to get to the point. Are you serious? No, but seriously, but The Blood is Still. You spoke about the opening of the 3rd book, but the Blood is Still. It's only the 2nd of yours that I've read, but you just really do such a great opening, which of course is the secret to getting people to read to the end. I mean, if you've got a crap opening, but the point being, this opening, there is a man lying on a battlefield, I assume, slowly bleeding to death, and it's his whole thought process. If I don't think I'm giving it away. It's in the first part of the book here, right? That's where it starts, and that's where the title comes from. Curious, because I know this in my own work. Did you see that scene, and independent of writing the story or anything somewhere in your mind? Was that something that came to you, or I'm just very curious to see if that was something, kind of a set piece you'd written in your mind ahead of time before you even knew what you were going to do with this book, or was it just part and parcel of writing the book?
Yeah, hang on. I'm just making that cup of tea that you were talking about.
And while you're answering, I'm going to step out and go to the loo. I'll be right back.
Yes, actually, it did. That was what came into my mind right away. I had no storyline. I just had this image of a man lying on the battlefield at Culloden, which is just outside Inverness in the Highlands of Scotland. It's in the modern day, but he was wearing a period costume from 1746 and a claymore through his chest, and the claymore is the huge sword, Scottish broadsword. And that was the image that came into my head. I had no storyline. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. For some reason, it just came into my head, and everything was built from there. I don't plan what I'm writing. I just start writing and see where it takes me. Sometimes that works, other times it doesn't work. But in this one, it did. And I hit the usual pitfalls, the problems that I have in that process. But obviously the book is now real, so I got to the end of it. But that was the start, and everything else was built on it from there.
I'm glad to note that, or glad to know that maybe I pegged that one, because I read it and I just thought, wow, this is so. And I just the whole thing, readers or listeners, you must read this and check this out. But the swirling of the snowflakes and just the blood slowly, leaching from his body into to the earth, which, as you say, is steeped in blood, and then away we go. We're back with Rebecca. How has it been? You've been kind of cozy with Rebecca the past few years, and you did say that you're going to continue. You don't see any reason not to. But are you more or less comfortable with her now? Is she kind of like an old pair of slippers, so to speak, in the writing vein? Or are you finding her to be challenging with each new book?
No, the Rebecca books are challenges. I do set myself challenges all the time. Because I'd hate to feel as if I was getting into a rut. But Rebecca in particular, and Rebecca began as a challenge. When I started to write Thunder Bay, it was, to challenge myself. Could I write something that was not set in Glasgow, the west of Scotland, where I'm from? And could I have a central character who is a 20-something female? Because I am not a 20-something female, as we've noted before. So that was the challenge that I set myself. And so, but each book is there are always things that you think, and no, they're not easy writes for me. I freely admit that the Rebecca books are not easy writes for me, because I have to stifle my impulses to have characters kick doors in. Because that's the way that my sort of crime writing mind often goes, is I'll have somebody kicking a door in here, and it's because of Raymond Chandler. If you feel your storyline slowing down, have two guys kick the door in with guns in their hand. And prior to Rebecca, that was my mantra. So Rebecca is a complete change for me. So they can be difficult writes. Yeah,
she's not Davy McCall.
Oh, she's not. Certainly not.
And just as an aside, really quickly, that's a what was that? That was 4 books that you were talking about, a previous series, right? With Open Wounds, Devil's Knock, Blood City, and Crowbait, and that was a completely, I would say, just opposite end of the spectrum character, Davy versus Rebecca. Eh?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, Rebecca will talk. She has her issues. All my characters seem to have issues. She certainly has her issues, but she will talk. Davy did not talk. Davy was a hard write. Davy himself was a hard character to write, because everything was internal with him. The reader knew everything about him, but the people around Davy didn't know him quite as well as the reader did. And that's the way it should be, to be honest. Yeah. But yeah, I liked Davy McCall. And in fact, there is a sort of nod to him in one scene in The Blood is Still.
Oh, well, readers love the callbacks. We love those kinds of things. Those are such fun. Well, so you've focused, as you said, as I said in the intro, as we're discussing, you're focused so much on the fiction. You have such, though, a pedigree in the nonfiction world of crime, and I was curious: is there any? Are you paying attention to the newspapers locally about local crime? Is there anything going on in your part of the world that is informing any of the Rebecca series at all?
No, no, nothing locally. I mean, this is the Greater Glasgow area, so there's always lots going on. And yes, I pay attention to a certain amount of attention, not as much as I used to, I've got to say, but I do pay a certain amount of attention to the real life crime world. But no, there's nothing really. The Rebecca books are set in Inverness and the Western Highlands, and they share some issues with the bigger cities, but they have their own issues. And each of the Rebecca books relate more to something in Scottish history or Scottish mythology, as it was with Thunder Bay, than real crime. So not really, no.
Yeah, and you open the book. The Blood is Still with an F. Scott Fitzgerald quote from Tender as the Night. There are open wounds, shrunk sometimes to the size of a pinprick, but wounds still, this is very true. And that's you talked about how your characters have issues and how Rebecca has issues. That wound, of course, those wounds could refer to her wounds. If you're a reader of Thunder Bay and you're getting into this next book, but then that she's got some listeners, she's got some issues, definitely. But are you referring, do you think, to the wounds that Rebecca's carrying, or is it, I guess you could also refer to the wound of the person dying on the battlefield? But I'm just curious as to if it's both ways, or are we really talking more about Rebecca?
It is Rebecca, but also, and I've got to word this carefully because it's a spoiler, but also the solution to the murders. It relates to that as well, and that particular person, because of that particular person's background. And I've got to be careful because you can so easily, especially as I'm sort of 2 books down, you can so easily just give something away without realizing it.
Well, if you do, I won't notice because, like I say, I'll be in the loop. But if you say something you regret, let me know. We'll trim it out of there. But it's interesting too, though. In the acknowledgments to the book, though, you do talk about about how you make up all these locations. Like Thunder Bay takes place in this mythical, very cut off, very remote area, and then you're talking about this book. Inchferry doesn't exist. I made it up. Don't look for it. You say.
Yeah.
Is that something you've run into, though? Actually, with people looking for these places.
I haven't. But it's just because I needed an area like that. And again, I know Inverness has areas where people say there are issues, but I didn't want to pick on a particular area and have what happens in my Inchferry happen there, because I think that would be unfair. So that was why I invented Inchferry. But no, nobody's actually. It was I always cover myself just in case somebody says, I was looking for Inchferry in the map, I can't find it. So that's why I put things like that.
It's interesting. Here's I'm pinballing back around a little bit here, but about Rebecca. But she's also we talk about this and about the kicking indoors aspect. She's a different type of character, and it's not just her femininity. It's just she's a different type of human being than, say, Davy McCall. But
yeah.
But she's up against a rather strong antagonist who's also a woman in this story, correct?
Yes, Mo Burke, the matriarch of a criminal clan in Inverness.
Yeah, who's got some sons, and one of them, I believe, has some Ben Affleck style good looks going on.
That's right. That'll be Nolan. I'm glad you said that, because I've just realised, referring to him in the 4th, I've used Al Pacino, young Al Pacino, so I'll need to go back and change that. So I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
Oh well, yeah. My work here is done. Then very good, very good. No, so I see though too that there's some issues with some right-wing elements in the story. how much, and I mean, you can't live where you do, what with Brexit and what's going on. Of course, where I live, but the past few years, you can't really exist without being steeped in the political situation. Is there any kind of a commentary meant there in the book about the political situation there with kind of as we mentioned, there's this kind of a right wing group that's getting pretty excited about what's going on in the book.
Yeah, to an extent, I suppose that there must be. It wasn't conscious, but because I was writing it when a lot of stuff was going on, and it did enter my head. I mean, I've exaggerated quite a bit. We don't have that huge problem that I'm talking about in the book. We do have our right wing groups, certainly, and obviously, like everywhere else, we have prejudice, we have bigotry, we have hatred, we have sectarianism here as well. And I obviously that was all going through my head as I was doing this. But what I wanted was I wanted a boogeyman, and coming up with this kind of extreme right wing group was the ideal way for me to pull off what I wanted to pull off. And also to have, the big set piece in the middle of The Blood Is Still, which is this riot in Inchferry that goes on. So that was what it was for. But they continue into the third book as well, so they come up in that too. And I wanted this, like Thrush and The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I wanted this organisation that, should the series continue, that it would be something that Rebecca would keep coming up against now and again when the need arose to have this particular individual who runs the group, who leads the group.
I think that's necessary for a series. I've seen that in several series I've read, that there needs to be, like you said, like Thrush. I love that. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. But having that kind of want of a better term, villain that's there, that maybe is not a constant in her face, but is around. And as a writer, I've got some of that in my own stuff, and I find it's kind of helpful for me when I need to kick in a door.
Yeah.
Right? You can always, they're kind of a good go-to for antagonism.
That's right. Yes. I mean, it's ideal. Certainly they're not, the leader and the group are not in book 4, but as I say, should it continue and the storyline demands it, they could come back.
Let me, if you don't mind, ask you a few process questions. I don't think we really got into those previously very much, and I'd just love to ask you: do you have a set? And this is usually an eye roller for most writers to get this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, just go ahead and make that cup of tea. But the point being, do you have a set writing schedule? Do you certain time of day, certain amount of hours, certain amount of words, that kind of stuff? I'm just curious about your process.
Yeah, it's pretty chaotic, really, and I try to discipline myself. I find at the moment, and it varies as well, I find at the moment, because the boys, Mickey and Tom, are getting me up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm able to get to my desk for 8 o'clock. And generally I will stop working round about lunchtime and go and do something else after that. I can't seem to write all day now. I don't know what that's about. There was a time when I thought I could only write in the morning, but that's not true. When I was doing the historical book, I was actually writing that all day. I think I was really into that. So that at the moment it's 8 o'clock, and if I can do 2,000 words or more in a session, I'm delighted. But I'm happy if I just manage 1,000, and I'm despondent if I don't manage up to 1,000. I just feel as if I'm failing badly if I don't manage 1,000 words.
Yeah, and do you necessarily even know what's going to happen, or did you just sit down and away it goes?
Sometimes I have an idea how it's going to end, but not always. And that's both the challenge and the irritation of the way that I work, is trying to get to where you want to be. But even then, I could start off a book and know that, right, I know where I want it to go, but it could change all the way through, and I could think of something different and go down an alleyway. But then I'll think of something that's maybe some sort of reversal that I hadn't thought of before. And I thought, oh, I could do that, and they won't see that coming. Which hopefully I've done with number 3, in something that I hadn't actually thought of until I was halfway through the book, and I thought, oh no, wait a minute, that's who that is. That's who that could be. So that's the joy for me, and that's that excites me when I come up with something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting in my own process. My editor, he looked at something I did, and because I told him flat out, I said, I'm about done with this. I've done all I can do. It's too much like work. It's and I've got the day job on top of that, so I've just got a lot going on. And anyway, but he got done with my last, and he turned it back around to me, and he said, listen, I think you've just got enough gas here with this new character to be kind of a repeating villain. You've got a new villain. And he said, that's what I think your books have needed for the past couple of editions, and find that. Well, that excited me, and that got me going. Excuse me. But I stalled out, and I got to a point where I dreaded going to sit down and write because I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going with it. So I'm always curious about that with other writers, particularly someone like yourself who is full-time writer. You've got a contract. You're under it. You're under the gun.
Yeah.
And I wonder though, because you have hinted here and there in social, and you and I've chatted offline a little bit, that it's sometimes it's tougher lately on some of the books. It just has a hard time. So I'm curious, how often do you sit down kind of and kind of let out that sigh and go, all right, well, let's just see if I can get the magic going again. Is it getting harder, or does it just depend on the project? Because as you said earlier, the historical fiction book, you're just dying to get that thing done.
Yeah. Well, if my publisher and agent happen to be listening to this, then no, that never happens. But if they're not, if they're not all the time, I sit and I go, oh God, what am I going to do now? And just hit a brick wall quite often, because I mean this is the drawback of being what we call a pantster. And not a planner, is that you hit these brick walls, and it's not writer's block. It is not writer's block. It's just you have written yourself into a corner. And I take solace in the fact that I remember reading an interview with William Goldman, who I've already mentioned, I think, but who is one of my writing idols, both in screenwriting and in novels. And he was writing Maverick, I think it was. And he found himself in trouble. He'd got Maverick into such a position that he didn't know where to take him. Oh, yeah. And it wasn't that he was blocked. It was just that the way he had written it, he just had to stop and think, wait, I need to think about this. How am I going to get him out of this? Now, eventually he came up with it. And that's this, I'm going to use the word skill because maybe it's not, but that is the skill of what we do, is that we will hit these brick walls and we either climb over them, walk around them, or blast our way through. It's just a matter of trying to, of thinking about it. Saying, right, I've got that. I think I know where I want to get to. How do I do it? And that's part of the fun as well.
It is fun, yeah. And I always feel that part where I get to where the basically the lumps of clay are on the table, and that's finally done, and then I can just start shaping it, Yeah. And then, like you said, you're finding connections, and then you're getting 3/4 through, and you're going, wait a minute, what if I were to do this? That's fun. I've just had trouble this past year. I thought during lockdown I would be the most prolific writer you've ever seen. Couldn't write a damn word. Yeah. How was lockdown particularly tough for you creatively, or?
Not really, because if you remember, up until recently, I was living out in the wilds, and so lockdown. People say to me, "How are you coping with lockdown?" And I'm saying, "Well, I actually don't notice any difference, to be honest."
Well, you didn't get any haircuts, that's for sure.
I didn't get any haircuts, no, and eventually I did. My hairdresser had to use a whip and a chair, but It didn't affect me. So during lockdown, let me think. I wrote part of a novella with my friend Gordon Brown. I wrote the third Rebecca book, and I wrote the historical book. and I started number 4 because lockdown here has just been eased in Scotland. So no, I don't think that it did affect me at all. But then it didn't improve my output. I don't think. I think some people it really improved their output because they were at home, so they had nothing else to do apart from perhaps vacuum or clean the bath. So they decided to write instead. So yeah, but it was a worrying time. It still is to an extent. But I've had both vaccinations now. So in a week or so, I'll be ready for my superpowers. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward with a bit more confidence than I did even 2 or 3 months ago.
Well, you mentioned Gordon Brown and Denzel Myrick. How does that work? Do you ever turn to your fellow crime mystery writers for help if you're stuck on something? And you mentioned that Denzel had read a portion.
Yeah.
Do they beta for you, if you don't mind saying?
Yeah, they do. In fact, only yesterday I was talking to Denzel about a particular issue with number 4, and he gave me an idea. And another friend, Neil Broadfoot, who's a published author, is having a read at the raw draft at the moment for me. So yeah, and Gordon and I, who also writes under the name Morgan Cry, he's got a book just out in the USA as well. Called 31 Bones, which is very good. Should buy it. So it's with Skyhorse. That'll please them. We've got their name in as well. So yeah, we do talk, and I'll help other writers if I can. And we discuss our stuff. We even read each other's stuff, and there's a group of us that do try to help each other as much as we can. Denzel, I have to say, is one of the most successful of them all. I hate him. I really do.
I was going to even put in a link to some of his work, but now that I've realized you hate him, I'll tell you what. But no, definitely. Well, thanks for that. I it's something about you though. I see that with you. You're very open-hearted about this, and you don't seem to be one of those writers who is cloaking his process or his work in any kind of mystery. You're about it seems like you, and because I see you do all these wonderful things with other writers. You do some stuff that's pops up here on YouTube and in the media there, and it seems like a really collegial and supportive group.
It is. They're great. They really are great. And ever since I started doing the fiction, when I was doing the non-fiction, I was kind of an outsider. But once I started doing the fiction and I joined the Crime Writers Association and I met more crime fiction authors, and almost to a man, that they're very supportive, very helpful. Being Scots, of course, you get a lot of insults and a lot of backhanded compliments, but they're a great bunch of people overall.
As I reach back to our first interview, you and I both share a love for the American Western, and we talked about the big what I think is a kind of a philosophical argument about whether Shane lives or dies or anything. We discussed all that, but I haven't heard you mention you are going to write your Western anytime soon. Is that still something you would like to do, or am I making that up?
No, it is something I would really like to do. But as you know, and I think I said the last time, that I viewed the Davy McCall books, which were set in the Glasgow underworld, as westerns. I took the western approach. I suppose that there is a western approach certainly to the historical book, if you ever see that. Lots of horses, of course. So and guns, and indeed doors getting kicked in. So it's I really would love to do a western. I've got sort of 2 in mind. One which is a traditional western, as it were, which is set in the American West, and one that is set here in Scotland, but it's still a western. So yeah, I would love to do it sometime.
Well. It sounds like you've got plenty to keep you busy. Of course, you've got Rebecca, and more is coming. Somebody kind of famous named Ian Rankin said, if you don't know Skelton, now's the time. I happen to agree. You'll find links in the show notes. But as we wrap things up here with Douglas Skelton, I just want to check in with you and ask you one more thing, if you don't mind, sir, is
Yep.
what do you think's going on with books? I like to ask successful authors what's going on with the industry. I'd love to know what you think. Did lockdown have an effect on sales in general, do you think? Do you think that books are going up, going down? What's your thoughts on the industry?
Well, from what I've read, and I know you ask successful authors this, but I'll answer anyway. What what I've read is that there's been a boom period, certainly here in the UK. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but the publishers have said that there's been a boom period, not just in digital books, which is surprising, but also physical books. Bookshops here were closed over certain periods over the past year and a bit, but when they were open, they did seem to welcome a lot of customers back. They also moved online, so there's a lot of online marketing going on. So I think, yes, I think it's looking quite bright. It is not the case across the board, of course. I think there have been some casualties, and I think there are some worries in certain areas. But as a general point, I think lockdown proved to be good for the book buying industry.
I know it's not your favorite term, but I think you've somewhat embraced it anyway for marketing sake. Tarte Noir, which is, if you told me before, just real quick. I mean, any thoughts on that? Is it just one of those things? It's like, to hell with it, fine. It's Tarte Noir, or are you still bridling at that descriptor?
Yeah, still sort of. I mean, it's fine. It's a marketing term, and it works. It does what it says on the tin. But it just leads to quotas. It leads to you being sort of pigeonholed. And it's my view is that we're all writing crime, and it's not even if what you're writing is good or bad. It's if people enjoy what you're writing or they don't, and it shouldn't matter whether it's set in Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Kansas, New Orleans, wherever.
I totally agree. Well, all right. If we want to get we want to get Thunder Bay, of course, and you want to get the Blood is Still and get on the Rebecca Connolly thriller train, where's the best place to go find them?
Obviously online. In the USA, hopefully in your local library, you can get it there. If you don't, but certainly online, I would say is the place that you're more likely to find it. And hopefully in the US in your bookstores, but obviously I can't vouch there because I've not been for a while.
Well, we'll definitely, as I'm venturing back into bookstores, I'll make sure that they remember that if I don't find you on the shelves. And actually, it's funny. Yeah. I'm actually talking to my local library soon, and I'll check that out as well. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, I want you to go up to the counter in the bookstore and say, "This is an outrage. Why have you not got Skelton's books there? I am never darkening your door again unless you get his entire canon on that shelf within a week."
There, folks, I want every one of you to do this and go follow Douglas on Instagram and on Twitter and tell him you did it and give him the response that you get back. It'll be great. It'll be really grand. If you want to learn more about Douglas Skelton, just go to douglasskelton.com. Not only do you have information on all of his work, he's got a blog, he's got all kinds of fun stuff. You'll find out about appearances he's going to have, all sorts of stuff there on douglasskelton.com. Douglas, I'll give you the last word. Anything you want to tell all of those wonderful, mysterious goings-on listeners?
Yeah, I also contribute every second Monday to the US-based blog Type M for Murder. So every second Monday I'm on there. So please go there and subscribe if you can. Doesn't cost anything, just subscribe.
Douglas, thank you so much for making so many cups of tea today while we discussed everything. And I appreciate you covering for me while I was in the loo.
Thank you very much for having me.
I love podcasting. I have since 2006, back when you had to use like a Dixie cup with string to make the thing work. And that's why I'm so excited that we recently moved Mysterious Goings On to Anchor FM to record our podcast. I gotta tell you, I don't regret it a bit. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Not going to lie to you, when I first heard about Anchor, I was a little dubious because I've been doing it the hard way for so long. But I gotta tell you, it's very easy. Use a Stripe account, get sponsors. You're not paying monthly hosting fees. The sound quality is great. The distribution is phenomenal. Friends, download the free Anchor app today if you want to start your own podcast, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Remember, you heard it here first on Mysterious Goings On. Hey, just a quick note, listeners. We have had some issues with my first book. Oh my gosh, The Ghost of 12 years ago, Pilot's Cross. Apparently, something was corrupted in the file, and there are some widows and orphans in there. And I don't mean in the story, I mean in the layout. This is very embarrassing. We have had a variety of editors and copy editors over the years, and we thought this last version was darn near perfect, and of course it ain't. We've gone back in, and by the time you hear this, it should be in great shape. And I just want to tell you, if you bought the ebook, refresh your ebook reader, and you should be able to get the newest version that we put out there that's I hope clean, totally clean, as well as we've got a paperback coming as well, or should be out by then as well, and maybe some other little special treats. My apologies for this. It's probably something most readers blow off, but it's cost me a star and a review for sure, and it's embarrassing, and it's not the kind of product that I'm used to putting out. So I wanted to just bring that up with you. And again, Pilot's Cross, and if you've purchased the ebook and you are concerned about it, make sure you reboot your Kindle or go on your wherever it is you go to re-up new editions of books you've already purchased. And if you haven't purchased it yet, I'm telling you, it would have been a 4-star book by this book reviewer, this professional book reviewer, had we had it. So that tells you there. So you need to go out and get it, right? Pilot's Cross is available as an audiobook, as an ebook, of course, and as a paperback on Amazon.com exclusively. So I hope you will go out and check that out. And again, please accept my apologies. This is not the way I like to do business, but things happen. Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget, we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading.